And we're live. Good day, Whiskey Brothers.
Yay!
We are honored to have you, the viewer, and our panel, our very loud, boisterous panel with us tonight. My name's Dolph. I'm the president of the Alberta Scotch Society, founder of the Whisky Book Club, and your host tonight in trying to corral these cats on the side. It's my job. For those of you that are new, I'll tell you a little bit what we're about. We're a bunch of whiskey geeks that like to share a dram, share our passion of reading, and mostly about whiskey or whiskey-related activities. That's what we do. The choice of our present tome, this one right there, was inspired initially by our sense of adventure and my long-held desire to do the Whiskey Trail in Scotland and the Bourbon Trail with our neighbors down south. Canada has so much history, so much whiskey. Why not do our very own whiskey bourbon tour? But we're going to call it the Canadian Whisky Journey. Got to be called something different because we're better. Thanks to Blair and Davin's tour guidebook. This one right here with loads of pictures, which is good for visual guys like me. And we've got checklists in here, maps, directions, suggestions, a whole bunch of kilometers to the next distilleries. We have the direction we need. And we have the inside track we need to see the distilleries we crave. And today's one we crave is 40 Creek. And we're here today. Davin and Blair will indeed be our spirits guides on this journey as we cross this vast, beautiful country of ours. However, when we are done this hour, stick around as we continue the fun with the more relaxed atmosphere. The broadcast is called the After Dram, and it starts probably 10 minutes after this one's done. So we're going to start, please, our roundtable introductions with the names and our other platform handles, as well as what you've prepared tonight. And I'm guessing not all of us will have the 40 Creek Confederation Oak Reserve. Beautiful bottle. And I do love what this bottle looks like. It looks very good. But we're going to start with Blair, Davin, our spirit guides, and then Chris, and then Nicole, and then me for the introduction. So let's get that rolling if we should.
Hi, I'm Davin de Kergommeaux. I'm the co-author of this book, The Definitive Guide to Canadian Distilleries. You can find me on social media at Davin D-E-K, D-A-V-I-N-D-E-K. And since it's 40 Creek, I thought that I would try the 40 Creek 22-year-old rye.
Oh, lucky.
A pretty awesome whiskey. I'm down to my last few drops in this bottle, but I got another bottle upstairs.
Woo. You are so lucky.
Hi, Blair Phillips, the co-author of the Definitive Guide to Canadian Distilleries. Tonight, I have some unity, some victory, and then the latest in the trilogy, some resolve.
Right.
And I know that George Lucas is watching tonight, and I just want to tell him this is how you do a trilogy, George.
That's perfect. Good job. You tell him too.
Hey everybody, I am Chris Thompson. I am the North American brand ambassador for Creek. I have the greatest job in the world. I get to hang out and do stuff like this, kind of preach the gospel of 40 Creek all over North America. I'm super stoked to be here, sharing our great stories and our great liquid and shooting the breeze with everyone. And my dram of choice tonight, I will be going, Copper Pot is my jam, but I'll be going back and forth between that and Confederation Oak as well.
Nice. Welcome to you, kind sir. And Nicole.
Hi there, everyone. I'm Nicole. I go by Nick, and you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Black Cat Whiskey. I am drinking Confederation and later Forger, and I have a backup. If I run out, it is the original Barrel Select.
Oh, gee.
Alrighty, and like I told you before, I'm Dolph, president of the Alberta Scotch Society, founder of the Whisky Book Club. So I've got this Confederation Oak, but I'll probably be opening it and comparing it to this Confederation Oak just to see if we can see some slight differences in there. Because as the people out there know, I like to two-fist it when I'm drinking whiskeys on the air. It just gives me a little bit more to talk about. So we all ready? Let's start with a little bit of history that I obtained from the 40 Creek website. So, and Chris, I'm sorry, but I'm really long-winded, so you're going to get used to that pretty soon. I talk a lot with really short questions. So The first Canadian whiskeys were typically made from high percentage of corn as a base mixed with rye and barley. As distilling traditions developed over the years, the standard, mild, smooth-tasting Canadian whiskey formula became popular across the continent, especially during Prohibition times in the States, the 50s, the 60s, and the Civil War as well. I'm adding that to the information they have. Public tastes waned towards white spirits and wine during the 70s and 80s, leading to a period of what they considered, and 40 Creek, a period of stagnation in Canadian whiskeys. They're not the only ones that consider that a period of stagnation. By the 90s, though, Canadian whiskey industry had consolidated greatly, with only a few large distilleries making the majority of the whiskeys each year. So that comes from their website. And Davin and Blair, I'm going to ask you if you could add something to this history to help us understand 40 Creek's break into the market, because Davin's been a proponent of you guys from the very beginning. So I want to hear from them if that's all right. Davin and Blair, go right ahead.
Well, yeah, I'm going to show you the haircut my wife gave me, and then we'll get on with it.
It's perfect.
I do remember the very, very first 40 Creek bottles that came out that were in the LCBO. But 40 Creek has been around for a long time. In fact, it was founded in 1972 by Otto Reeder, and they had those two cute little stills that they still got at the distillery, making eau de vie. And it was a difficult time for them, and I think John Hall went in there, in fact, as a consultant to help them into bankruptcy, to help them close down, and he saw such a great opportunity that he ended up buying the distillery and turning it into 40 Creek. So it was around. So I've been saying for quite a while that 40 Creek was the first craft distillery in Canada, the first micro distillery in Canada. And if you go back to 1972, of course it was. But also they were the very first to really emphasize selling their whiskey by flavor. And John Hall's philosophy was that his whiskey would always be a little bit more flavorful than everybody else's, all the competition's whiskey at the same price point. So he kind of started making whiskey, but he was a winemaker for 20 years before that, and he made his money making wine, which he could make quickly and sell quickly. But he then eventually, after about 10 years of making whiskey, he finally thought that they were ready to release. He released this one, the 3 grain, which is, I think, fabulous. And he told me that was his favorite of the two. The other one was the Barrel Select, which Nicole is drinking tonight. And he put them out in the market. And when he saw that Barrel Select was taking off, selling like crazy, he discontinued 3 grain and started really focusing on 40 Creek Barrel Select, and he turned it into like a phenomenon in the United States of America. That's the only distillery that has broken into the United States in the last probably 40 years. Also, because he was making whiskey that was more flavorful than everybody else's, some of the other major legacy distilleries started looking to 40 Creek. Because they were seeing these guys are like he was at one time. He was the 4th fastest growing spirit of any kind in Canada, and the fastest growing whiskey. And all the big boys were looking and saying, "Holy crow, what's he doing that we're not?" They realized it. So he really kind of kicked off this new renaissance of making whiskey that was not just for the pipeline, but that was to appeal to connoisseurs. So I really think that 40 Creek really started it all in Canada. This new revolution, the renaissance of Canadian whiskey, and the others, as good as their whiskeys are, they're still kind of playing catch up to 40 Creek, especially if you go to the States, American bars there. I think that we have some fabulous innovators. You can't beat Crown Royal, just can't. I've tasted like 20 different Crown Royals that'll never be released because they don't think they're quite good enough. I did a show in New Orleans a few years ago with Crown Royal single malt whiskey and things like that. Just fabulous stuff. But the guys who've been leading the way from the very beginning have been 40 Creek, and that's because John K. Hall it was absolutely focused on doing only one thing right, and that was making whiskey. Sorry if I took over, but I'm really quite
Show's
strongly.
over.
Pardon me?
The hour, and thank you very much, Whiskey Brothers and sisters. Blair, do you have anything to add to that? Maybe if you could talk a little bit about Bill, something like that.
Well, yeah, Bill has been with the distillery from the Reader days, and in fact, he made whiskey with Otto Reader, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that was a three-year-old blend that they sold before John Hall came around. And when John Hall bought the distillery, they sold off a lot of that stock to help finance the sort of the rebirth of the distillery. Yeah, no, he's been there forever. A lot of people should realize that behind every 40 Creek whiskey has a bit of Bill Ashburn's stamp behind it.
Yeah. And thank you, gentlemen, because I think it's nice, or it's important to highlight both what John did and what Bill did as they came together. Bill still being there, but John building the base. He was the name behind it, but it's nice to have those two names kind of joined together. I like that. So thank you very much. Chris, let's get you in on this. And I know you told this several times online, and I'm sorry to do this, but could you tell us why you're called 40 Creek?
Why we're called 40 Creek? It's actually... It's a real geographic place. So where we are in the little town of Grimsby, Ontario, way before it was ever the town of Grimsby, there's this little creek that kind of breaks through the Niagara Escarpment and runs right through what is now the heart of downtown Grimsby. Okay. And when that area was first being settled, the first settlers used to call that area the 40. Because that little creek, that little waterway, is roughly 40 miles from Niagara Falls. So it's not exactly 40 miles. The road kind of went like this a little bit back then, but that was kind of where they, there we are right there. So it is actually a real geographic place. You can actually go and visit 40 Mile Creek. It's a real body of water.
Perfect. Thank you very much, kind sir. And I didn't do this, guys. I should have done this previously. I always say our trek took us here and there. So this is Davin when he left Ottawa to get all the way down to 40 Creek. If you look at it, it took him 4 hours and 53 minutes to get there. So thank you very much, Google, for showing us that.
On a unicycle.
Look at on the unicycle. Well, 12 hours then, maybe. And Blair's from Toronto. Blair, how far are you from Grimsby?
About 8 hours. The traffic. Okay. Not right now, but let's say last year, the traffic going from Toronto to Niagara Falls that goes by Grimsby is mental. Like it's just a parking lot.
Is it because you're following the water and it's just picturesque, or is it just massive people?
It's a mass of people trying to get to Niagara Falls or to Buffalo to shop or to 40 Creek weekend for once. It's a crazy roadway, as Chris can mention. But realistically, on a good day, I could do it in about an hour?
Okay. It looks like it'd be fairly close. So
but there's been times that I've been there, it took about 3 to 4 hours.
Oh, that would drive me crazy. Well, good for you, Blair. Thanks for coming today. This is what Nick and I did. We went from Patton 5, Winnipeg. Now, if we flew, it's 2 hours and 15 minutes. But if you go through the States, 20 hours and 6 minutes, or you snake your way through all of the little lakes and around 20 hours and 2 minutes. So people don't think of this, and I talk about our big, vast, beautiful country. The distance between Toronto and Winnipeg is massive. We could fit. If we go to Europe, we could fit Belgium and France and Germany going across, and that's the distance that you're getting between two of our major cities. So we're very far away, but it's all good. I need to show a clip, if I may. So I stole this from Whiskey Cask. I didn't show it because I'm giving him credit for it. So I'm going to share my screen here. So give me a second, just so we can see this one clip. And hopefully this works right away, because I don't like too much dead time. Here we go. The infinity thing going back. That's for everyone. So we're going to watch this for a little bit. It leads me into my next question.
5 years, then 40 Creek Distillery founder John Hall left his distillery in Grimsby, Ontario, after selling the company to Campari. Since then, he's kept a low profile until 2019 Victoria Whisky Festival and the Canadian Whisky Awards, where he was the keynote speaker.
John, I think, has done more to raise the profile of Canadian whiskey than anyone I can think of, at least in the last couple of decades. John took a new approach to marketing Canadian whiskey. He made himself the face of his brands, and over a period of 2 decades, he turned 40 Creek into a true phenomenon.
John Hall grew up in what he calls South Detroit, Windsor, Ontario. Just across the river from Detroit.
Doesn't that look beautiful?
Canada's largest distillery, the Hiram Walker Distillery.
In the late 60s, I had to walk past that Hiram Walker Distillery twice a day, hiking to and from school. There must have been something in the aromas that were emanating from that distillery. Because when I graduated in 1970, the only job I wanted was to be a whiskey maker for Hiram Walker. Now, this was the boom boom years of the 70s, when every graduate had at least 2 or 3 job offers before they were leaving out of their graduation gown. The only exception to that rule was me.
After 22 years of making.
All right, so I'll stop that right there, if I may, and then go back to us. All right, hopefully we see each other right now. So, Davin, this question for you. So, when 40 Creek was bought by the Campari Group in 2014 for $185 million, really good money, John spent time with his family, and he was allowed to have no links with the industry for 5 years. So we came back then with you at the 2019 Victoria Whisky Festival for the first time. He was a keynote speaker for that dinner. But Davin, could you tell me why this was such a good night for him and for 40 Creek as well, please?
Well, I think that was, if I can remember correctly, that was the night that 40 Creek won Canadian Whisky of the Year with a very spectacular whiskey that I'm drinking tonight, which is the 40 Creek 22-year-old rye. A whiskey, by the way, that was made by Bill Ashburn, and he carried 40 50-pound sacks of rye up to dump them into the fermenter. It was that craft, believe me. It was that micro, and turned out 22 years later, they finally got around to bottling it. I think it only made, I can't remember, 110 bottles or something like that. So it was really quite special that they won, and that was not anything set up in advance like that. We didn't know who was going to win until the last minute, and John had already agreed to speak. However, John, it was like old home week. Everybody wanted to talk to John, and of course, all the distillers, especially the new distillers, wanted to listen to John and his success story and what he did. And he is such a giving guy. He really told people how he got into the business and how he made such a tremendous success about it. I think probably the most important thing that John taught us that night is humility really pays. He's a down-to-earth, humble guy. He doesn't talk about how wonderful he is. He just talks about his whiskey. And when you get him off, the things he's talking about are fishing, his wife, things like that. So it was a great night for us and a great night for him, and a real coup to get him for the Canadian Whisky Awards.
Now, Davin, was it Whiskey of the Decade as well, or was it that year or a different year they won that?
Last year they won Canadian Whisky of the Decade. That was with Confederation Oak, and that whiskey has just won. It's won Canadian Whisky of the Year twice, and over again it has been a gold medal winner. It was in Whiskey Advocate magazine. For ages, it was the highest rated whiskey at 96 points. John Hansel did that rating. John Hansel gave it 96 points. And nobody has, I don't think any other whiskey has ever scored better than Confederation Oak. I think a few have equaled it now. But of course, Confederation Oak, each batch changes. And I think that John tasted batch B, which was fabulous. It was maybe batch A or batch B. Batch B was beyond sensational. So anyways, Confederation Oak, whiskey of the decade. Yeah.
Excellent. And distillery of the decade, right? That's the one. That's the title? No, sorry, Davin. Is it?
Yes, I can't remember who wants distillery of the decade. I'm sorry, Dolph. I have had like zero time today to do my research.
Blair, when you tasted it, do you remember tasting the Confederation Oak? And I'm asking this because you do go through the blind tasting, but I didn't ask you last week. After the blind tasting, are you able to come back to what you had and find out who you voted for? Like, is it revealed afterwards?
Yeah, we find out afterwards. Yeah, I don't know when does. Okay, so I have Confederation Oak here from this is lot 1867, which I believe is the third yearly release, right?
Is there a letter after that? 1867?
No, this is the 1867. This is the one from the actual when it was the Whiskey Weekend release.
That's the original.
That is batch A.
Yeah.
Wow.
Is it, or is it batch pre-A?
It just says 1867.
Yeah,
that's the OG.
Yeah, so I this is the last one I have, and I'm going to be nursing it for a very long time. But I don't know. I don't really go back in the Canadian Whiskey Awards and start digging through the samples to find stuff to try, unless it's something I've never tried before. There we go. But Confederation Oak has always been a strong performer for everybody, I think. Like, no matter what, it's always right up there.
I've got, so this one was H for me, and this one's G. So what's that mean? H is which one? G is which one? Second, third? Do you know?
H, A, B, C, D. So yeah, each one is a.
It started on A. Okay, I'm way behind.
No, we started with just 1867, and then 1867-B.
Got it. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Nick. Do you have any questions yet on the side or any of your own?
Nothing on the side at the moment, but I have a question of my own. So I saw 40 Creek when John Hall was still leading, and he's just this amazing storyteller, and he engages with whoever's in the audience in front of him, and the innovation that was coming out of him was amazing. Then he sold, and I'm sorry to say, it feels like the innovation dropped off. Like 40 Creek had this potential to be so big, so amazing. And I gotta say, I haven't picked up a bottle since I last saw John. So what's happening? Like, do you not do the innovation? Are you changing it? Or are you keeping it really craft and keeping it local and it's not going across Canada anymore?
Nope. So we have continued to do limited editions. We have, and some of them have been spectacular, quite frankly. They've won some pretty awesome accolades. So we've never really taken our foot fully off the gas on innovation, but we had treaded a little bit lighter for a little bit as the Campari group was kind of getting to know us. We were getting to know them. I think Bill was treading a little bit lighter than we had in previous years. But no, we've always continued to do these annual releases. Some of them have been pretty spectacular. I mean, in particular, I think the last two for sure for me were very highly regarded and met with an awful lot of fanfare across the country. So, yeah, no, they're widely distributed across the country and in the U.S. as well.
One of these or not? Are these the
All
last
of
ones? Or are these the most recent?
Those are older.
Go the other way.
Those are older? Okay.
It's kind of funny because in where I live, like in Ontario, is that I haven't felt that feeling. Like it's still a big deal every single September when the whiskey comes out. So when like I'm just thinking of like Founders Reserve, Harmony, Unity, Victory. They to me it feels like there's a big rush to go get them that weekend. So I don't feel that disconnect at all. And the Harmony was just ridiculously good.
See, I guess for me, I've enjoyed 40 Creek, but really it's gone very quiet. And I've had no interest to pick up another bottle because I don't know what's been good about it, what's been amazing. It seems like there's been a bit of disconnect from the distillery to those outside of that central location of where that distillery is at. So if you're going west, you don't feel that connection anymore. And I know when John was speaking at the last event, he was talking about doing some cool things with wine and whiskey. And I was keen to hear and see this happen. And some of that innovation I didn't see coming out. So I was like, oh, okay. It sort of just gets pushed to the back and you don't pick it up.
Well, I mean, I just know from a sales standpoint, our numbers have, with the exception of this year, have grown significantly in Alberta and BC in particular over the last few years. I mean, there's been a big uptick for us just in terms of overall sales. Most of that obviously is centered around barrel select and copper pot and a little bit of double barrel, but a lot of limited releases. You guys get a little bit of it, quite frankly. I mean, we don't make a ton of it. We make anywhere between 13 and 16,000 bottles, not cases, and we spread that all over North America. So getting some of those limited releases still remains a little bit difficult sometimes.
Well, Nick, you and I are just going to have to go to Ontario and pick up every possible bottle we have and just drink our way back west is the way it's going to happen.
We can do that.
I think so. I'm going to stick, Chris, with you. I know you worked with John for a little bit, so maybe you can answer this question, because I would have had this for John. He's obviously not here, but this is what I would have had. And I hope you feel confident enough to read this, so I'm not putting you on the spot. So after 22 years as a successful winemaker, he decides to take a right turn and get into the distilling business. So one, that took lots of guts, and good for him. At what point did the focus swing from him from money making? Well, and he was making money with wine, from going from wine, making money, to whiskey, and possibly making money. Like Blair already said it, they were producing some whiskeys already, but to take that big jump, when was the big jump and why? Let's go with that.
Yeah, I mean, so I think, John had always had this passion for whiskey. It was always kind of in the background of his mind. It was something that he always wanted to do. He pursued his education with kind of that goal in mind, and didn't get his first job in the spirits industry, and embarked on this really great, successful career in the wine industry. But while he was doing that, he watched the whiskey category go a little stagnant. People sort of started to lose a little bit of interest, and when he had the opportunity to do some work at Reader Distillery, light bulb went off. He's like, you know what? This might be a really unique opportunity. This distillery's in receivership, so I can pick this thing up for pennies on the dollar. They've got everything I need here. They got stills, they got tanks, they got a team here who actually knows how to make good spirits. They're just making the wrong stuff. They were very much focused on ODs, and he really looked at it as an opportunity to, bring some craftsmanship and bring some attention back to Canadian whiskey. So he really looked at buying that Reader Distillery as a real opportunity, and that was the goal, was to kind of bring Canadian whiskey back. And when he met Bill Ashburn, and in the early days when he first took control over the place, I mean, those two kind of put their minds together that they were going to go and make a serious effort to kind of change the way that people thought about Canadian whiskey. So he really viewed it as an opportunity to kind of reinvigorate the industry.
Perfect. Good answer. And I was going to say, if you didn't know, just make one up anyways. And
No, I mean, having been around those guys long enough, that's, that was very much, that was very much at the forefront of their mind. They knew that they could do something better and bring a whole new level of attention back to the category. And they did just that.
And so for everyone else out there, what's O to V, if we could tell them? And I already saw it.
Yeah, it's basically, what they used to do is they would take all the tender fruit in from all the local fruit farms, press it, and distill it, and turn it into things like, fruit brandy and kirsch and all of these other kind of really niche-y types of liquor.
Yeah, perfect. And you're talking about, you had a relationship. What type of working relationship was it then? Because I'm going to talk about your working relationship now. But how was it before with John and Bill when they first started out? And you've been there, I think you said 10 years or maybe a little bit more?
Yeah, just under right now. So yeah. Okay. And it's great to have, worked a little bit with John and obviously worked a little bit with Bill, and certainly more long-term. But since day one, those guys had a very mutually appreciative, collaborative relationship. They both had very similar views, although sometimes conflicting, but generally similar views on really wanting to kind of push the boundaries, to do things differently, to be innovative. And John Hall had this real knack for, being able to go out and communicate with people and talk to people and be very genuine. And he was a great storyteller. And I hear this all the time. Just people felt a real instant sense of the guy was just genuine. And so those two would collaborate on liquid. John Hall would go out and pound the pavement and basically leave Bill to his own devices at the distillery. And then John would come back and Bill would have a few things kind of in the hopper and, hey, I was thinking about this and this. What do you think? And they would go back and tweak some more liquid, figure out the next release, and John would go back out and pound the pavement. So I always like to say this. Bill Ashburn over the years has really made us taste good, but John Hall made us famous.
He did. And you know what? You're doing a great job as well, because you had to take over the reins from an icon. No, these are not easy things to do, Chris. So you're taking over from an icon, and you're all over Canada, North America, the States. And I've seen you online tons these past couple months. So you're doing, I don't know how many times you're on, but Trenny and C for an hour and a half. That was yesterday or the day before. I think I've seen you twice this week. So, and I've been doing a bit of research. I saw you on TV making it with a mixology course or morning TV. So you're kind of a busy guy. It's pretty good. But I'm going to ask you a question. And we're going to keep talking about people. So this is one of your quotes. So Chris, the people that work for your company really want to work for your company. It's not just a job for them. People in the facility, including the core group on Ashburn's team, are super passionate about what they do. Okay, so I love the fact, and here's the next one. I love the fact that this small group of people is responsible for making the best whiskey in Canada. So what? Do you still feel this way? And based on that, no, let's stick with that first. One question at a time. Thanks. Do you still feel that way?
Yeah, I really do. So yes, things have changed in the Campari era of 40 Creek. There's been some significant investment in our facilities because they believe very strongly that this great little Canadian whiskey has international potential. But really, at our facilities in Grimsby, at its core, there is still a very small group of people that are responsible for making our whiskey. And that has remained largely unchanged for the past 20 plus years. I heard an interesting stat at one of our recent company town hall meetings. And Bill brought up a really interesting point that the average tenure for one of our production supply chain workers is something like 25 plus years. So people never leave. So the turnover in our facility has been, very, very small. A lot of our people have been with us. A bunch of them are old Reader Distillery people. A lot of our team was, back with us in the early 40 Creek Kittling Ridge days, and they're with us today. So they feel really really strongly and very passionately about what we do at our little facility in Grimsby.
So is Bill's team essentially the ones that are the mainstays? Because I think the distillers would generally be the ones, they're the longest, I'm guessing.
Yeah, no question. So on the production side, that side of the personnel of our company has remained very unchanged. We got all kinds of new bean counters and lots of new marketing people, and obviously we've expanded our sales team across the country. We used to have some agencies that used to represent us, but now it's all of our own people across Canada. But that supply chain production team, those people have been with us for a long, long time.
Chris, a question from the side here. It says, with the new ownership, has the company culture seen some changes?
That's a great question. And so obviously, when you have new ownership and, it's you always take this big breath like, okay, so what's going to happen? So the Campari Group, we've been very fortunate, although, we're not this small, little, nimble company where we do things very quickly and react. And we still like to think of ourselves as a bit of a, we can react relatively quickly. But in the grand scheme of things, there's a lot of layers and processes that are now in place as being part of this, broader organization.
Yeah.
But one thing that the Campari Group really, really does well is they have this really fantastic corporate culture. A few years ago we were having a great year, and basically they said, hey, in Italy everybody takes Fridays off during the summertime, so everyone, if you can, take Fridays off with pay, which is fantastic. So you don't see that in a lot of companies, and certainly through all of this COVID-19 stuff, a lot of companies have reduced their workforce. Stop people's car allowances, cut bonuses. Our company has done none of that. They have maintained everything status quo, asked people to, try and find ways to kind of reinvent your job and find ways to make it work. I feel really fortunate to work for this company, having, been part of the original guard and being part of the new Campari Group way of doing things. They're great people to work for. They really try and do their very best, and the corporate culture is outstanding.
Excellent. Thank you very much, and that's good to hear. Right? You always want the nice, good stories. Although I don't know you're going to talk smack about the Campari Group on here. We'll wait for the after Graham. Maybe we'll find out. But we talked about Bill a little bit, and I'd like to kind of add him a little bit more into the conversation. But let's talk about the limited releases first. So I'm just going to throw the pictures out. Actually, no, I already threw those pictures out. We're good enough. I've got Bill quoted as saying he's trying to build on previous years, trying to come up with something that's just a little bit better every year. And I've got another quote from him here as well. There we go. I'm still kind of chasing that holy grail of the very first release that we did in 2007. This one's probably the closest I've come to so far, and that was 2019. I think he was talking about Victory. I think at this point, I'm not terribly sure. And the unfortunate part, he says, is that we had a lot of very unique liquids that were available for the first release that are no longer available. So you know what? It's taxing him a little bit. With what he has to be more creative. I don't think that's such a bad thing. It's good for these guys to be creative. Earn your paycheck, Bill. It's all good. I'm wondering for you, though, Chris, how many of these limited releases have you tried? Like, were you able to go back in time and taste the ones from before you? And do you have a memory of them?
Yeah. So when I joined the company, I had missed a few of the limited releases. And if you know anything about some of these 40 Creek limited editions, most of them sell out pretty quick, and then they kind of disappear into the ether, and they're really hard to get their hands on. So I have actually gone back and sourced a few in the aftermarket and found a few at private liquor stores where they didn't really know what they had. I'm like, ooh, I'll grab those. So I actually have all of them in my collection, and I managed to grab 2 or 3 of pretty much everything, with the exception of the original small I've tasted it. Bill has. We've sipped a couple of drams in the tasting lab at the distillery, but it's the only one that I don't have a physical bottle of. If anyone wants to sell me one.
That's the one where he marked on the barrels all the corn and rye and the barley that he likes so much. And any of those still kicking around with his little signature on it?
Oh yeah. There's if you go through the our main aging warehouse at the distillery, he's got a bunch of those barrels with the big chalk marks on them. Oh yeah.
Oh, so it's still there. Okay.
Yep.
And sorry, I got this picture here. So Davin sent me this. So who's those good-looking guys there? So we got Davin on one side, we got Bill, and who's on the far? Well, I don't know if it's right or left because I'm looking in the mirror. The Pig Destroyer. Who's that?
Can't tell who that is.
That's John in the middle and Pig.
John in the middle.
And Davin, Pig Destroyer. Who's that?
He's a fan.
Okay. I'm just wondering.
Dolph, I've got a question for Davin and Blair. So, because you are both so close to the distillery, you've talked about this weekend, this whiskey weekend, where you go down to get these limited releases. Is this something that the geek needs to do in Canada, to go and make it part of your thing, to go to 40 Creek for this weekend?
I would, yeah, definitely. I think I don't know if I have the right stats here, but I think this is one of the biggest whiskey events in North America, with just the volume of people that come through. It's something else. It's quite the experience.
What's it like?
They promote it pretty heavily because like you see that. So September 21, 22 for 2019, and they're just. I saw Lightfoot. I'm thinking Gordon Lightfoot. Is Tara Lightfoot related to Gordon Lightfoot there, Chris? Do you know? You're the music guy, so I'm wondering. Just tons of people. If you go online, there's lots of information.
Yeah, like if you ever see Field of Dreams at the end when all the cars coming, it's like that.
It's that.
Yeah.
And they're all coming from Toronto in a 4-hour trip to get there, right?
A lot of people from Toronto, but there's a lot of people coming from Ohio and across the states. It's just a convergence, and it's become this phenomenon. It's there's nothing else like it. It's hard to describe. You have to come and just experience it.
Yeah, it's honestly it's the best whiskey event I've ever been to. Better than the Isle of Whiskey Festival.
And you go down south as well. Last weekend you would have been in the Tales of the Cocktail, right?
That's right, except it was virtual this year.
Yeah. Well.
But no, I've been to most of the shows in North America at least once. Here's the crew that comes from Cleveland. They're in our book. The Cleveland crew. Okay? Every year, they're passionate. Some people come into that 40 Creek weekend and they leave with, 6 or 7 cases of whiskey.
Oh my.
Oh yeah.
As a Canadian whiskey geek, there are 2 things that you must do. Number 1, you must go to both days of 40 Creek weekend.
Okay.
And if you do that, you're 60% of everything you need to do in Canadian whiskey. The other thing is you have to go to Don Livermore's Blending 101. Okay. That is another thing that is, it changes your mind about whiskey, but nothing exceeds 40 Creek weekend. Go to both days, stay at the motel across the street, walk to the distillery because you're going to want to walk home. Okay.
Well, stumble home, Davin. Stumble home. And if you guys, I didn't say this at the beginning. So 40 Creek's on page 176. And if you look over Chris's shoulder, you see the book right there as well. So page 176, we got 40 Creek. 177 is the group from, where are they from again, Davin?
Cleveland,
Ohio.
Excellent. And they come every year.
It sounds like so much fun. It really, really, really does. And I wish I could go. We're going to go back to the limited releases if we can. And Chris, do you have, actually, no, I'm going to do 2. So we have Victory. Mm-hmm. I'm wondering if you have other ones that have kind of that historical link. And we'll talk a bit more about history later, but any others like that?
No, that was that was the only one that we did that had any kind of historical connection. And actually, it was funny. We really, when we were kind of going through the idea of doing something to commemorate, this historical event that kind of happened in our backyard, the engagement at the 40 during the War of 1812, we started doing an awful lot of, we worked with the local historical society and the good folks at Nellis Manor, one of the historical homes in Grimsby, and we learned an awful lot about kind of, that the town of Grimsby, before it was the town of Grimsby, was this little hotbed during the War of 1812. And then what we also found out is there's actually a bunch of really huge history buffs that are on our production and supply chain team. So, I mean, and I didn't realize this, but our master blender, Bill Ashburn, has been every New Year's Day gets dressed up in period military garb and fires a cannon at Fort George every year on New Year's Day.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. So we
just seeing a picture of him lighting a cannon is like one of the greatest visual things I've ever seen.
That's good. And I'll just put this history one. This is the Instagram one. So if you want to read that, Major Battle of War 1812, and I have something that I'll pull up there later. So if anyone wants to, the Instagram links, their Facebook, their Twitter links, their homepage is all down below in the description of this. So you can go see that if you want. Chris, do you have a favorite of the limited releases? Anything comes?
That's a hard question. It's like picking your favorite child, right? So I think for me, I got two. John's Private Cask has always been one of my favorites. It's actually one of the ones that I had to work the hardest to get. I got my entire John's Private Cask collection completely by accident. A visitor came to our little brand house in Grimsby at the distillery, and we're just shooting the breeze, and we're talking about, some of the old releases. And I started talking about this John's Private Cask, and I said, it came in a blue box. And he's like, blue box? I'm like, yeah. He goes, I think there's a few of them at my little liquor store in northern Manitoba. I'm like,
get them.
Here's my card.
Just send it back.
When you go home, call me. And literally, I never expected to hear from the guy. He calls me like 3 days later. He goes, all right, so Chris, I'm staying at the store. They got like 5 of them. I'm like, great, I will take them all. And this guy doesn't know me from Adam. He goes, all right, fine. How am I going to get them to you? I said, I will wire you the money. Just stick them in a box and send them to you. That's how I got all my bottles.
Nice.
Yeah.
So it pays to be really social, doesn't it, Chris? So
it does indeed.
Oh.
So yeah, I think that's probably my favorite. A close second for me would be Heart of Gold.
Okay.
Yeah.
Although Bill's not as happy with Heart of Gold as he wants. I've got a comment about that later. We'll get back to that. Yeah. Nick, do you have a favorite?
I don't remember the name of it. It was one that John had brought out for a event at Jasper, and he was pouring, and it was something that he'd been blending with some wines, and he'd been experimenting with. So it came out in a bottle with no label.
Oh,
because it was a small event, and he just started to pour around the table. There was, I think, 40 of us in the room, and he's like, "You'll never try this again." And he just
I love those days. That's good.
Yeah.
No, I do. You're a little bit sour that you can't get something if you fall in love with it, right? But it's still the experience, and with the people. I love that. Good for you.
It was the experience of sitting there and going, wow, they're pouring something amazing. You're never going to get it again, but it's the memory that sticks with you. And you're sort of like, okay, I love it just for this.
Good. Thank you for that story. That's good. Davin, how about you? Do you have a favorite? The one in front of you, the 22-year-old?
John's Private Cask, without question.
Okay.
Without question. And I do like this small batch reserve. I'd happily trade it for 12 bottles of John's Private Cask. So.
Excellent. That's a good idea. I'll get in on that with you there, Davin. Put my name right beside you.
And you know what? I have to say one more. I'm totally in love with 3 grain. I found a bunch in a liquor store in Rhode Island and bought them. bought them, and I poured them at a whiskey tasting in Providence, and people went nuts about 3 grain. It's really fabulous whiskey. It's wonderful. And
so I'm confused, Davin, because if you look at my picture up here, it says coming September 2020 3 grain whiskey and reintroducing 40 Creek 3 grain. So I'm wondering, when did it go away and why?
Well, yes, this 3 grain was one of the originals. Okay, it was one of the original whiskeys that they brought out as soon as Barrel Select started to sell. John Hall he's a very personable guy, but he's incredibly intelligent and very strategic. And he said, you know what, I can only make one whiskey really sell. If I have to focus all my attention, he focused it on Barrel Select. So he just stopped making 3 grain. And Chris, you know the story better about how it comes back, and it is coming back. And by golly, you better buy some of those.
Yeah.
Now, Barrel Select did really well. Like if we look at all these competitions, it does well, right? And so does the Copper Pot. It does really well. But the 3 grain, and what's the 3 grains? I'm guessing it's rye, barley, and corn. Am I wrong?
Bingo. Okay.
So, Chris, please enlighten us.
So, as Davin mentioned, I mean, this was the second official release from 40 Creek. It came out in February or March of 2000. And in order to make the company successful, John decided to put all of his marbles behind Barrel Select, and ultimately that worked. But 3 grain kind of it grew on a lot of people. We think it was a whiskey that was just kind of ahead of its time a little bit. Got these beautiful, it's a tiny bit more barley forward than Select. Extremely well balanced. It's beautiful. It's got all these great, gorgeous, dusty rye notes. We're bringing it back one final time. So yeah, this will be the end of it.
Oh, okay. So, Davin, I'll take your advice. I'll grab the 5 or 6 of them. Good. Before Nicole. Blair,
it's reviewed in the next Whiskey Advocate magazine.
Well, Nicole's going to hate me again because, unfortunately, just due to we're only going to be releasing 3 grain in Ontario.
It's funny. We hear that a lot, but no, that's good. We've got a couple friends that hopefully we could do that, right, Davin?
I just don't get into that business at all. I don't buy or sell or trade or anything like that. But I'll bet you $1 that the next time I'm in Edmonton, a few bottles have found their way into my luggage.
You're a very nice man. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And Blair, you can come with them with a couple extra bottles. But tell me, Blair, what's your favorite limited release, if you have one? I don't want pressure.
I have a soft spot for the original double barrel. The second Portwood is fantastic. I can't.
You don't.
It would take me. No, I'd have to go get them all, and then it would turn to show and tell. I'd be like, hey, look at it, and it'd be like midnight by the time I get through it all. So I like them all, but Portwood, the second one, I'm gonna go with that.
And I saw that at a local place. It's called Whiskey Drop, just open here in Edmonton, and I did see that behind the counter, and they do little tasters. And I wasn't able to talk to them yesterday. They were busy with another brand ambassador, but I saw the port, and I really wanted to, because port's my favorite finish of them all. It really is. I either love them or hate them, but when I get one I like, I'm very devoted to the port finish. So I'll look forward to maybe tasting Blair's one day. I have to go and raid his place if we ever make it to Ontario. Bill, I've got another very long question. Not Bill, Chris. No, Bill. We good? Here it's going to be long. So,
All right.
but it's a quote from Bill, so that's where my confusion lays. So I find whiskey making a very much a mental process, and I'm thinking in my head about what flavors will combine. So I've got this here and here. There we go. He doesn't draw liquids to put together until he's completed that mental process and then checked it over on paper to see if it makes sense. All right. So it might be a month before samples are drawn or put together. And it's almost impossible to explain how it happens, he said, of the whole process. But he says he's fortunate that the owners of Campari and 40 Creek have a lot of faith in his taste buds. So is that one? Yeah. I'm wondering how much faith you actually have in this gentleman. So, or how much does Campari have? So let's say you personally, you know them. I'll say you have tons of faith in them because you wouldn't want to embarrass them even if you had no faith. So I'm not going to put that on your shoulders. Let's put that Campari. How much faith do they have? How limited is he by the business side? If he wants to put a 43 and 46 and they say, no, we're just doing 40, which is a general trend with you guys, right? For 40, how much leeway would he have if he says, I can make this taste 25% better with 3 extra percent?
And I love that question because, you know, we've been asked, you know, hey, can you guys do cask strength stuff? Can you do some overproof?
Yeah.
Typically, it's not been our style. It's just not one of the things that we feel where the, you know, where our flavors are, you know, balanced properly. And so, to me, Bill's a genius. And I've had the great privilege of, you know, sitting in the lab, tasting projects as they're kind of work in progress. The guy's got a tremendous palate. And he describes it perfectly. Like, he literally has envisioned these whiskeys in his head, and he's got kind of, you know, the flavor profile kind of figured out. You know, tries to physically figure out how to do it. The Campari organization has given him a tremendous amount of freedom. I mean, basically, just from a you know, to update our facilities. I mean, I think Campari Group spent, you know, the part of $3 million, almost $4 million on you know, capital improvements at our facility in Grimsby. And basically, like, Bill kind of drew that out on a cocktail napkin and said, yeah, I kind of think I need this. And they're like, okay, great, go do it. He goes, should we have a meeting? No, we just had it. Go ahead. So they put a tremendous amount of faith in knowledge, certainly on the production side of things. And, you know, he always looks at it this way, is that whiskey, certainly the liquid has to be great. Also, you know, we're part of a business, so, you know, we have responsibilities. So not only does the liquid need to be great, but it also kind of needs to have some kind of business sense behind it, which is equally as important. So they, you know, from an innovation standpoint, they kind of let him do his thing. There's, you know, of course, everyone wants to chime in, but Bill always does what Bill wants to do. Period. Yeah. You know, he'll do the, oh yeah, I'll tweak that a little bit for you, and it's exactly the same thing that he made the first time. But yeah, no, they really put a tremendous amount of faith. You know, I don't think I would call it carte blanche, but it's they let him do what he wants.
All right, good stuff. I'll add to that in a second. Nick, we're going to finish off with you because we're coming up on the hour right away. But I'm going to have one last question, then we'll go to you and we'll finish it off. All right. So Chris, one last one. So if he decides that he needs 100 barrels of gold lace Canadian maple alligator chard, does he get the go ahead to finish off or redo his Heart of Gold? Does he get that okay to spend tons? He says this is going to be the best whiskey you've ever tried ever, but I need a phenomenal amount of money.
Boy, you've taken carte blanche to a whole new level.
Why not? Gotta do something.
So, I mean, as much as creating great whiskey requires some freedom to, you know, experiment and innovate, it still has to make some business sense. But, you know, Bill can make a good business case on how this liquid would make sense. I mean, Yeah, I think it's a definite maybe.
Excellent. No,
Yeah.
that's good to know. And we kind of know the answer to it. I'm pushing your buttons. I know that,
Yep.
Chris. But there are certain master distillers out there that do have a lot more leeway than others because they've been around and they've proven themselves. And I think he has. So
Yeah.
I think he's done well. Nick, do you have that last question for us before we round it up?
Yes. So 40 Creek now belongs to a larger conglomerate. Do you still, or does the business still think of itself as a craft distiller, or are you now part of big business and do just big business?
That's an interesting question. So I think we've never really, referred to ourselves as craft. We always thought of ourselves as kind of like this, little underdog whiskey that kind of fought really hard and was disruptive and ultra competitive. And we still look at ourselves that way. So for us, it's a bit of a balancing act. Yes, we are, without question, a big time, big league whiskey making machine. But we haven't really, at least I don't think we've lost, that little edge. I think we were on a little bit of a hiatus for a few years while the Campari group was kind of figuring us out and we were kind of figuring them out and trying to figure out a good way to move forward so everybody was really comfortable. But I think certainly, for me in the last, year and couple years, that competitive edge is back. That little underdog mentality is back. And so I would never consider us, we definitely think we played a role in kind of introducing this whole new era of craftsmanship and innovation and hopefully, encouraged the industry to become better. We think we like to think we played a pretty big role in that. We were always the little company that thought big and thought aggressively. And at the end of the day, we turned into a company that is a little bit bigger and just became really popular with a lot of people across North America. Did I answer your question a little bit?
A little.
I think so. Yeah. So we hit the hour. We're going to go to Blair, Davin, and Nick and Chris. Any last comments you want before we go over to the after jam, gentlemen and Lady Nick?
Just say thank you very much for having us on the show, and I hope people will buy the definitive guide to Canadian distilleries, a guide to 200 or more distilleries right across from coast to coast in Canada.
It is essential reading if you are a Canadian whiskey fan.
I agree.
Yeah, likewise, pick up the book, go straight to page 176, and I'm going to go dig out my Portwood for the next session.
Oh, you're making me jealous. Last comment.
If you see, probably everybody's familiar with Barrel Select and Copper Pot and maybe our cream liqueur, but if you see something else from 40 Creek on the shelf that you might not have tried, grab it. We make some spectacular whiskeys. At any given time, we make 7. So grab something you might not be as familiar with and try it out. And I'm pretty sure you're going to make some new friends.
Beautiful. Nick?
Definitely. We all need to have this, not just sitting on our bookshelf, but reading through. We need to do more of the Whiskey Trail in Canada. And it sounds like we need to definitely arrange something in Ontario between Dr. Don and 40 Creek and make an amazing weekend happen.
That would be fun.
Well, I'm going to say a week, Nick. Can we make that a week, please? That's a rough weekend, I think. We're just sitting there. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been a fantastic start to our evening. So in Alberta, it's an early evening, but it's a good time in Ontario. They're 7 o'clock. We're 8 o'clock now. Thanks to our listeners. Thanks to our panel. Chris, Davin, Blair, and Nicole, it's been an absolute pleasure spending all this time with you guys tonight. The time just flew. It went really quick. So we're moving on to the distillery tour to the tasting room. We're going to have a more relaxed time. It's equally as engaging, but we are going to spend our time with co-authors Davin and Blair Phillips of, and I always take a deep breath for this, The Definitive Guide to Canadian Distilleries, the portable expert to over 200 distilleries and the spirits they make. They're, of course, going to be with us because what better summer activity is there than traveling virtually if we can't travel, trying some cocktails and spending some time with great people. And I will have cocktail, but not everyone will. I try. Please join us 5-10 minutes on this channel for the After Jam. And if you don't want to miss a minute of our next 9 weeks, please click on the like, subscribe button down below. And there's also a whole bunch of information on the links for this book, as well as the links for 40 Creek, as well as the people who I stole some pictures from and some videos from tonight. So Whiskey Cast, I kind of referenced them in there as well. I thought I should, since I'm stealing their stuff. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. And we shall see you in about